Chapter 1. Failure. Greg Mortensen was lost. He didn't know it yet. He was hiking down the Baltoro Glacier, a frozen river that flows along a mountain slope at a rate of 4 inches a day. His heavy black boots didn't seem to be moving any faster than the ice beneath them. At any moment he thought he'd look up and see Scott Darsney, a fellow mountain climber, sitting on a rock waiting and laughing at him for being so slow. But he didn't realize that he had taken a wrong turn. He should have been walking west, toward a village where he hoped to hire a jeep driver to take him out of the mountains. In reality, he was now headed south, into a landscape that was a maze of shattered chunks of ice. Greg and Darsney were part of an expedition that had set out 3 months before to reach the summit of a mountain called K2, part of the Karakoram Range in Pakistan. K2 is the second highest mountain on Earth. Only Mount Everest reaches farther into the clouds. Most mountain climbers consider it to be the toughest peak in the world. Its slopes are so steep that snow can't cling to them. But Greg Mortensen knew what he was doing. He'd reached the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro by the age of 11. He'd learned to climb in Yosemite National Park. He'd made it up mountains in the Himalayas before. He had no doubt that he'd reached the top of K2 with the amber necklace he carried in his pocket. It had belonged to his sister Krista, who died on her 23rd birthday in July 1992. Greg planned to leave the necklace on K2 in Krista's honor. And he'd come close, within 600 feet of the summit. But now he was headed back down the mountain, Krista's necklace still in his pocket. Failure, not something he was used to, was on his mind. Greg and Darsney helped to rescue another member of their team, Etienne Fien. When Fien neared the summit of K2, he'd gotten extremely sick as fluid collected in his lungs and tissues in his brain began to swell. This can happen to people at altitudes above what their bodies are used to. Along with the expedition's leaders, Dan Mazer and Jonathan Pratt, Greg and Darsney had carried Fien down to the mountain to where a helicopter could land and take him to a hospital. Mazer and Pratt had returned and managed to reach the summit of K2, but Greg and Darsney, already exhausted from a stressful climb earlier, had no strength left. Their only choice was to get off the mountain as quickly as possible. The human body doesn't function well in high altitudes of mountains like K2. Because air pressure drops as a climber gets higher, each breath takes in less oxygen. Operating on less oxygen than usual, people get headaches and feel weak, nauseated, and exhausted. They don't think clearly. Add in hard work and freezing temperatures like those Greg had experienced on K2, and it's easy to become seriously weakened. Tasks that were once simple for a climber like Greg Mortensen, such as walking with a backpack full of climbing and camping gear, became almost impossible. Greg had already lost 30 pounds in his attempt to climb K2. As he and Darsney made their way down to one of the base camps where climbers prepared for their attempt to reach the summit, they found it took them hours to cover 3 miles. As they struggled, Greg and Darsney met Musafer Ali and his friend Yaqub, 2 porters who made a living guiding and helping mountain climbers. They offered to carry the climbers' packs for $4 a day. Greg and Darsney gladly agreed. Greg didn't know it at the time, but Musafer was known as one of the most skilled porters in the area. But now, alone and walking down the Baltoro Glacier, all Greg knew was that he'd lost sight of Musafer as well as his friend. And Musafer was carrying the pack that held most of Greg's gear: his tent, his sleeping bag, his stove, his food, his flashlight, and his matches. The sharp crack of a falling rock brought Greg's attention back to his surroundings. A boulder the size of a 3-story house suddenly bounced down a slope and crushed an iceberg in front of him. It was getting dark, and Greg's mind was fuzzy. He tried to think back to the last spot where he'd glimpsed any sign of human beings. It had been hours since he'd seen Darsney. There were no signs that anyone had ever walked on the trail in front of him. No cigarette butts, no food tins, no droppings from the mules that were used to carry heavy loads. In fact, Greg realized, where he was walking didn't look much like a trail at all. As the sun set, Greg spent an hour clambering up a slope of loose rock, hoping to get a view that would help tell him where he was.